My name is Yvette Ruiz. I am the Vice President of Corporate Responsibility at JP Chase. I sit here in Austin, thank goodness, but support philanthropy for the firm in Texas and 6 surrounding states. That's the comment around my travel schedule. Strategic convenings like this event are critical to support as it acts as the perfect intersection of business, the nonprofit sector, and government to have conversations that will drive forward-moving community progress. Chase is a proud sponsor and is happy to support the ongoing conversation of creating affordability and economic opportunity for all residents. The focus of much of our local philanthropy is funding towards workforce initiatives that offer greater economic opportunity to Texans for all walks of life, though we are pivoting our portfolio to also focus on affordable housing and community development. As you may know, workforce and housing go hand in hand. Austin residents need affordable places to live. And while there is no shortage of conversations around workforce and affordability in Austin, our partnership with Housing Works Austin, the Urban Institute, and others in the room here today aim to support data-driven solutions that can be additive to our community strategy for inclusive and equitable growth. JP Chase has invested over $150 million over 5 years to help disadvantaged neighborhoods across the United States grow small businesses, build affordable housing, and battle food deserts. We are committed to helping address major economic and social challenges by expanding economic opportunity and driving more inclusive economic growth. And it is our hope that having timely, relevant, data-driven conversations will help inform local leaders and decision makers so that we as a community can develop strategies that help advance economic prosperity. Our elected leaders in the city of Austin and Travis County are working hard to ensure that all residents have equitable access to economic opportunity in our region. From developing the Austin Metro Area Master Community Workforce Plan, say that 5 times fast, to developing the Master Workforce Plan, to undertaking efforts to provide affordable housing, our leaders have been at the forefront of addressing our region's most pressing issues. And looking a little bit more forward to our immediate future, the keynote conversation this morning will focus on the important work being done by our local leaders and will be moderated by Evan Smith. Smith is the CEO and co-founder of the Texas Tribune, a nonprofit, nonpartisan digital news organization, which has won numerous honors, including a Peabody Award. He is also the host of Overheard with Evan Smith at KLRU, the local PBS affiliate. It is my absolute pleasure to ask Evan to join me here on stage for our first conversation this morning. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and introduce our speakers, the Honorable Mayor of Austin, Steve Adler, and our Honorable County Judge, Sarah Eckhardt. We'll have them join us on stage. We're just going to get started. You know who they are, right? Give them a big hand. Launch right into this. We appreciate the time, Mayor's time and the Judge's time and the opportunity to have a serious conversation about a subject that I know they both think about all the time. In fact, the county judge made a whole speech about this subject just last night, in fact.
Some of it, yeah.
Some of it. Let me begin by asking us to define our terms. When we talk about affordability, affordability means different things, Mr. Mayor, to different people. It's kind of a Rorschach test. Different people see in it different aspects of this conversation. When you think about affordability as it relates to this community, what do you put in that bucket?
I think you begin with what people spend most of their money on. Most of the people spend most of their money on housing, so I probably start there. And I probably go to the federal definition. Somebody shouldn't pay more than 30% of their income on their housing, or 45% of their income on housing and transportation and utilities.
Yeah.
And that way affordability is different things, different amounts to different people, depending on how much you're earning.
Yeah. Judge, I know that as you talked last night about the economic opportunity needs of this community, you did talk about housing, but you talked about a lot more things too. Your bucket is a bigger bucket than just housing?
It's definitely a bigger bucket than just housing. I mean, we have to have the buzzword is intersectional We have to have an approach that looks at all aspects of quality of life in our community.
Yep.
Housing is definitely one of them. And when we're talking about the continuum of need, each different family has a different definition of affordability, just as the mayor said, depending
Right.
on their income. We have a very, very wealthy community in aggregate. So I don't want to be looking at what's affordable for those who are above the national average with regard to opportunities. But we do have areas in our community, county-wide, that are not achieving the kind of opportunity that, that the aggregate numbers for the MSA would indicate. We have communities of deep, deep need where families of 4 are living off of $30,000 a year. Anybody in this room have a family of 4 living off of $30,000? Didn't think so. That's the kind of affordability that we need to be focusing on.
And Judge, you called out specifically East and South as parts of this community that you felt needed to be worked on, focused on over the next number of years. And what I thought was interesting, many things in the speech that you gave last night interesting, but in particular you talked about the need for everybody in this community to share in the prosperity of this community. Because we know that, as you said, this is a community that has great prosperity, there are people of great wealth, but the inequity, almost like an economic segregation, is not a problem that is solving itself, and it's not a problem that's being solved by others easily.
The market is going to solve a lot of stuff. But where the government is a great tool
Yep.
for adjusting where the market won't go. And in affordable housing, we've got some good tools for doing just that. Even in some cases, this sounds manipulative, but I want to be open about it, tricking the market to going into areas and building housing stock that they wouldn't if they were just looking at market forces.
Well, I love this idea that the government has a role to play beyond letting the market sort it all out. I want to come back to that because really what I want this conversation to be about as much as anything is the role that governments can play and should play, the opportunity, who is responsible for the obstacles to fixing this problem, and what are the opportunities for us all and at what level to talk about it. But to this point of the economic segregation or the prosperity that everyone should share, and Mr. Mayor, as if on cue, I woke today to a story in Recode, the online publication, talking about the increase in tech salaries in Austin year over year. Recode yesterday published the results of a study that showed that of all the cities in the country, the city with the highest year over year increase in tech salaries was Austin. Last year, tech salaries were 7% higher than the year prior, that the average tech worker salary in Austin was more than $200,000. And I thought, what an interesting thing to read on the way to a conference about affordability and economic opportunity. We really do have this barbell, do we not, in this city?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is that a bad thing? I mean, I wondered actually reading that story if that story was a bad thing for Austin or a good thing for Austin. How do you perceive it?
It's a bad thing. It's a bad thing because what we're doing is we're losing the middle in this city. We're losing the ability for somebody to move from one end to the other end in the city. And if you lose the middle, that ladder ability is gone.
Yeah.
It also politically, starts having a real disparity when you look at developing critical mass to be able to move things forward. It's a bad thing. The tech salaries are going up 7%, and you can focus at that end of the barbell. But there are huge opportunities in the city in the tech area that are not the $200,000 a year jobs. So associated with the tech, we have huge opportunities in the city for middle skill jobs that are tech related in our city. If we could expand those, that would be wonderful for the city. You talk about affordability, and there are two ways to make things more affordable. You either make things cost less, or you help people have more money that they can spend.
Right.
And we have to be working at both ends of that.
Which is easier for you as the mayor? Now stipulating that nothing that you do as mayor is easy, and that nothing about being the mayor of Austin is easy, right? Moving this government, this city's government in particular, but any city's government, is not easy. But given the fact that nothing is easy, which is easier? Is it easier to make things? Is it easier to make things cost less, or is it easier to raise everybody else's ability to pay for things?
I don't think either one of those is easier, and I think they're both necessary. And it's not a question of one thing. We have to be doing everything, and we have to be doing everything as many different ways as we can.
Right.
We have to do a better job of getting children into pre-K. We don't have the tool that San Antonio has, but there's still things that we can be doing.
Would you advocate for the tool that San Antonio passed some years ago, taking it to the ballot and asking people if they wanted to pay a small increase in the sales tax to fund pre-K for 4-year-olds?
Well, the issue in San
That was
Antonio,
controversial, you know, in San Antonio when that passed.
It was.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, the state legislature does not give cities the ability to be able to make the choices that to give us all the tools that this community would use if we had them.
Yeah.
So there is a certain sales tax component that we can spend in this city. A long time ago, we dedicated that money to Capital Metro in order to be able to build out a robust transit system, which is also important for
So your
affordability.
hands are tied in terms of the things that you might be able to.
That's right. They took part of that 1% that hadn't been
Right.
allocated yet and we can't do that without taking money away from Capital Metro. So we have to find, I think, other tools to be able to use. But we have education. We have the training that we need to be doing in middle skill areas in the city in order to be able to help people get more money. And then on the affordability, on making things cost less side, we have a bond election that's coming up here in November, and it needs a really healthy component associated with doing subsidized housing and affordable housing. But we have to do more than that. We have just adopted the city a strategic housing plan that talks about all of the rungs, and there are numerous tools at each rung. The housing at 80% to 120% in the city is going to be critical to preserving, and they say in the next 10 years we're going to lose all 42,000 of middle income housing that we have on transportation corridors to gentrification. And with that, we'll lose 200,000 people. We can't let that happen in our city either. So we have to be firing on multiple levels in multiple ways.
Let me ask the same question, Judge, of you. County government is like city government. Nothing's easy, only it's less visible. Many fewer people think about county government than think about city government.
I'm very happy to fly on
I bet you probably are. But the reality is, you do have a responsibility for litigating this, and I wonder to what degree do you think the county has the ability to solve either end of that problem, either the wage problem or the cost of things problem? Do you have what's necessary in your toolkit to solve either of those problems? And would it be easy to solve them if you could?
In the state of Texas, they don't give us a whole lot of tools. And as a matter of fact, more than the city, although the city certainly is hamstrung by many things that the state does, the counties can only do what the state specifically allows us to do.
Yeah.
The difference between county and city is that cities can do everything that the state doesn't specifically prohibit. The counties can only do that which the state specifically allows. So we even have less tools.
You have more restrictions on you at a time where local control is being managed closely by the state. You have less power.
Yes, so it is, that is a big challenge. But it has made counties, particularly urbanized counties, pretty creative and pretty targeted in that counties, more so than cities, because of our constraints, we really do have to look at what's within our power to change and be honest about what's not in our power to change. And as a county, I really don't have much power over wage levels. Wages are a market force that I really don't have any way. That end of the barbell, I really can't touch, with the exception of the wages of my own county employees. So I really, frankly, don't spend my energy there because I don't think I can actually affect that end of the scale.
Yeah.
I spend my energy at the other end of the scale, which is how can I use government resources to affect market forces that are making things unaffordable for a lot of my Travis County residents.
Are you more successful at this stage of your time as county judge than you thought you would be, or less?
more successful, I'm having a lot of fun. I mean, after you get over what you can't control, and there's a learning curve in county government, you go in with all kinds of ideas of what you want to do, and you hit this brick wall of impediment.
Right.
And after you get over the anger and despair and grief over the fact that you don't have that power, then you start looking at where you do have power, and then it gets fun. You start looking at things like, wow, well, what is our real estate portfolio in the county? And how much of that real estate portfolio could be used to redevelop for affordable housing co-located with county services? I have property in Travis Heights that could be affordable housing, co-located with deaf services and maybe some housing for kids aging out of the foster care system who are now becoming young adults.
So this
that could be interesting.
This is a puzzle, Judge, for you, basically, and you're just figuring out how the pieces fit together.
Yeah.
Because I think about county government in many ways. The word fun would not normally have come to mind.
It is fun, and then you come up against things that are intriguing, and then you go, oh, wait, that was intriguing, but that's not a good idea, and I shouldn't go there. For instance, we have public improvement districts in far eastern Travis County where we have developers come in and they want to do something that's above and beyond what state code requires. I can't require of developers even a building code, a residential building code. Did y'all know that? You can't have a residential building code in the state of Texas outside the incorporated city limits. Developers can self-impose a building code, and they do.
It's like self-deportation.
Right, exactly. And they do because our housing market is so strong, it's so hot, that developers in Travis County do use international building code because to not do so, they would have a competitive disadvantage. But I can't impose one. But when a developer comes in and says, I want to build something off of Eastern 290, over in the Manor area, and I want it to be super cool and have a transit hub and park amenities and contribute to the Gilliland Creek trail system, can I do a public improvement district to borrow money cheaper? That's super cool, and that's a really neat tool. And some have said you should ensure affordable housing in that public improvement district. Really intriguing idea.
Yep.
Except it's surrounded with affordable housing. The market's producing affordable housing in Manor. That's not where I need to trick the market. I need to trick the market in Travis Heights, right?
Right.
But we could reserve out final phase that's going to happen 20 years from now. And if we see gentrification in that area, that final phase, we can have what amounts to a right of first refusal on that final phase lot, series of lots, to do affordable multifamily there. Because 15 years from now, it might be gentrifying. It might be the new Travis Heights.
So let me ask the mayor if he considers this as much fun as you apparently consider it. My sense is that if we let her, the judge would wonk out for about 2 hours on this stuff, which is great.
I have my binder.
As far as that goes, this is a home game for you. I understand that. But do you get the sense? Do you get this? Is the process that you've experienced as mayor up to this point, as it relates to this issue, with all the obstacles that exist in place, but the opportunities as well? I feel
like grasshopper at the knee of Buddha here.
Oh,
that's achieved peace with what can be achieved and what can't be achieved.
I wonder if you're peaceful.
I'm not quite there.
You're not there yet.
And once again, the county judge is being overly modest here too, with respect to what she's done, even on the barbell issue. So we have in workforce development, workforce solutions, we have lots of people doing lots of things on workforce development, trying to train people up, trying to move them from one piece in that barbell to another piece in that barbell, doing lots of different things with scattered effort. It's been that way for a long time. The judge and I, by statute, are the CEOs of the workforce development in the region. A role that probably the leadership has never actually looked at and realized they were actually the CEOs of that.
Until Steve became mayor, Workforce didn't really acknowledge that we existed.
So we literally put everybody in the room and we said, you guys are doing 1,000 different things. What if everybody focused on one thing and we tried to do it really, really well?
Yeah.
So we said, come up with one metric or two metrics or whatever the appropriate number is, but don't come out until you can all agree on that's what it is that we should be focusing on. And then let's only give money to people that are actually moving that metric. And if it means you have to change what you're doing or whatever, and that's what they did. And they came back. That's how the community or regional workforce development plan just came back. It's been approved by your body, not quite yet by my body. But by ACC and by Central Health and by everybody at this point, that by 2022 we'll move 10,000 people out of poverty into middle-skilled jobs that will retrain another 20,000 people to a middle-skilled job that they don't have today. That's going to have a real impact on that barbell, on wages.
And do the resources, Mr. Mayor, to enact or enable that plan exist currently in this city?
Yes. Right now, that money is being scattered. It's not being focused.
So you're redirecting existing resources with a focus on this specific goal?
Not only on that specific goal, but on the strategies associated with the goal, on 3 job types, again, categories.
Yeah. Workforce is an interesting thing. We all know that the workforce conversation is crucial because the future of this state depends, the economic viability, health of the state going forward, depends upon having an adequate workforce and an adequately prepared workforce. And of course, that has different dotted line spokes out to things like higher education, public education, healthcare, and so on. Mayor, as you think back on the last legislative session and you think ahead to the next, there is another one coming. Nothing we can do about that. Do you believe the state is aligned with the goals that you and the judge have articulated on developing workforce, what needs to happen? Because obviously a city
Can we
like
just laugh really, really loud
Yes, you can laugh loud. This is like one of those old EFIS pitches in baseball, just softball pitch right up there. I mean, I want to ask you about this, seriously, about the state aspect of this, because there's been so much conversation about the relationship between the state and the cities on just these very questions and the degree to which the state enables your best work or impedes your best work. Can you reflect on that? Where do you think you and the state are aligned and not aligned?
It is hard to know where to begin.
Okay. So now you get to wonk out for 2 hours. Go ahead.
Let me begin on what I think is the starkest contrast as we move into preemption and state coming back in control. And the governor's declaration that he's going to try to cap growth spending on the county and the city to 2.5%.
Well, or require a vote of the community.
Or require a vote of the community
to go above the 2.5%. Right. Yeah.
All right. Now, think about what that means. So that begins with the premise that everybody's property taxes are rising too much, and we have to do something. And certainly here in Central Texas, people feel like their property taxes are going up way too much.
You don't disagree with the premise?
I do not.
Property taxes are too high. You are prepared to say. You
yes,
agree.
And they're going up way too rapidly.
Right.
In fact, the median tax bill, the tax bill on the median home has gone up over $1,400 in the last 5 years. That's the median home, over $1,400 in the last 5 years. But what people don't realize is that over $1,000 of that $1,400 is the state property tax. This is the tax that the state taxes, that the AISD collects and then sends to the state and does not come back. Now understand,
it's not actually a state. There's not actually a state property tax, but you mean the portion that goes to the state.
Well, to me, it's a state property tax.
Right. I just want.
I mean, it's because that's what it is.
Mr. Mayor, I just couldn't sit here and let you refer to a state property tax without pointing out that there is no state property tax.
You can point that out, and I'm going to continue to call it a state property tax because that's what it is. So I believe in equity, and I believe that a student growing up in the Valley should have the same education opportunities as someone growing up in Highland Park or in Westlake or in Eanes. But when the state collects that money, it's supposed to distribute it fairly, which means you do it by weighted. As rich as Austin is, and the judge was talking about this, we have a higher than average student population in poverty. We have a higher than average student population speaking English only as a second language at home. Those students are more expensive to educate. District Court says that the weight we should use when we send the money back should reflect that actual cost. When I was working as a staff rep in the legislature in 1997 with my friend Elliot Shapley, who's a state senator from El Paso, I was trying to change those weights and measures because they had been adopted in the early 80s, and they were outdated. It didn't reflect true cost. I was unsuccessful in doing that. The weights and measures we use today are exactly the same ones I was trying to change back in 97. It's still the 83. But what this means is that the state, as property values are going up, has been reducing what it contributes to public education, which means that the school districts have no choice. They can't lower their rates because the state isn't participating, which is why the state property tax has gone up 288% in the last 5 years. It's gone up almost threefold in the last 5 years. When people talk about their property taxes going up, they're not talking about the increase in city taxes or county taxes or hospital taxes or all of those things added together. What people are feeling is that almost 300% increase in the state property tax. And yet we're going to go into a session where we're talking about changing the cap in local property taxes from 8% to 5% or 8% to 2.5%.
So what you're saying, just so we're clear, your view is that the reason property taxes are as high as they are is because the state has defaulted on its obligation to fund public education properly. And that if the state wants to reduce property taxes, the way to do it is adequately fund public education.
Absolutely.
That's the answer. And to the judge, we also know that the Part B of this, it used to be Part A, but now the education conversation has made it Part B, is that we still have, even 7+ years after the Affordable Care Act was implemented in this country, the highest number of people without health insurance in Texas in the United States of America. The highest percentage of our citizens and the highest raw number of our citizens. Those people go to the county hospital. Mm-hmm. They're treated for free. It's not free to treat them, but the cost of them is free. And those costs, uncompensated care costs, get passed along to all of us
in property tax.
The form of property taxes. So if property taxes are as high as they are, fix public education. If property taxes are as high as they are, fix health care.
Yeah, I mean, the state has stopped governing, y'all, and it's not a new thing. They stopped governing probably a decade ago. And now, unfortunately, the federal government is taking it straight from the Texas playbook. Stop governing, push all the responsibility to a lower level of government so that when those local leaders have to raise taxes in order to meet the basic needs of the citizenry, you can blame them for raising your taxes and villainize them.
Or they can blame you for cutting services in the alternative.
Or, in the alternative, blame us for cutting services. It's a brilliant political strategy. Yeah. But it is a devastating strategy from a community standpoint.
Right. Mr. Mayor, what would the one thing, we're going to go to questions in about 5 minutes from all of you. We'll have a microphone roaming around. I don't believe we're collecting cards, Nora. I think we're probably going to have a microphone go around the room, right? You can deliver one message to Governor Abbott in advance of the next session, or your state delegation, although your delegation largely agrees with you on the issues that we're talking about today. This is something that the legislature can do or can stop doing that would enable us to address the issues that we're talking about today in a more successful way. Affordability, economic opportunity, income inequality, pick your poison. What would it be?
It's not even close. I mean, if I had to pick one thing, it would be to fix the school finance system and start investing back in education. Yeah. Because that has thrown everything else out of balance. And then, because I would try to talk fast, I would probably raise a second thing, which is to say that when you're looking at cities are the economic engines. They are the centers of innovation for our state. As much flack as Austin gets, our unemployment rate is a full percentage point below the state average.
Below the state's, right, yes.
We are only 7% of the state's population, but we're a third of the patents, half the venture capital. We have more startups per capita than anybody else. We're doing something right in this city. And the state, rather than fighting that, should recognize and look at what it is that's happening here. Because it would be so much better if, as we're learning from other cities were able to learn and the state was able to learn from us. We should be learning from each other.
So your message to the governor is we want to make the rest of Texas more like Austin.
They should. with respect to those things that work, absolutely yes. And we should be borrowing the things that work too. But that is not how the state is being governed right now.
Right. Judge, I'll ask you the same thing. If you had the opportunity to tell the legislature to do one thing or to stop doing one thing that would enable you to do a better job of addressing these issues, what would it be?
It's actually very similar to Steve's. I would, if I could, and I try, I would tell the governor and the leadership, your major urbanized counties and the municipalities that are their engines are doing some really great experiments. And when those experiments work, they should be scaled statewide. So instead of punishing us for leading, let us be your labs.
Yeah.
And when it works in Houston or Dallas, when it works in Tarrant County or Bexar County, scale it statewide. And let us work with our surrounding counties that are suburban and rural in order to find those experiments that work too. Travis County, half of the land mass in Travis County is outside a municipality.
Right.
We have suburban and rural land in Travis County. We can experiment with what works in the rurals as well, working with our 10-county COG, working with Bastrop County, Fayette County, Caldwell County. We can be the engine of innovation for the entire state if they will let us.
Let me come at this before we bring the audience into this. Let me come at this a different way. The lieutenant governor, with whom I know you both agree on everything, during the legislative session at one point called out, as it related to the tension between the cities and the states, he called out Democrat mayors. That basically the blue big cities of this state were not the solution to the problems, as Judge Eckhardt is suggesting, laboratories of innovation where you might be able to scale success. But in fact, they were the problem in the sense that they were these big liberal, big spending outposts that were ultimately keeping the state from being more economically competitive. I wonder, Mayor, is politics infusing this conversation? You know, I was out in El Paso earlier this week where the mayor of El Paso, you know, the 6th largest city in the state, the 19th or 20th largest city in the country, was a Republican member of the legislature, elected by the citizens of El Paso to lead. And when I heard him talk about what he saw on the ground as the mayor of El Paso, he was opposed to sanctuary cities legislation. He wanted more investment in schools. He was opposed to the bathroom bill. I said, if you were back in the legislature now, Governor Abbott would be running ads against you. You sound like a Democrat. Well, being a mayor, ultimately, you have a different view of these issues. I just wonder if the politics of this are getting in the way of answers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Potholes are neither Republican nor Democrat. When you get to the lowest level of government that's closest to the people you're trying to solve problems, there is an expectation in our community and in the counties all over this state that their local government is actually going to solve problems.
Yep.
And that's not partisan driven. And in that speech, or in that talk, when the lieutenant governor was clearest on that statement about Democratic mayors, that conversation began with the lieutenant governor pointing out, and I think the context answers your question. The way he got to that sentence, he started off by saying, over the last 10 years, Republicans now control 38 or whatever the number is of state houses, governor's offices, positions among the 50 states. And then he said, over the last 10 years, we've elected so many more Republican lieutenant governors. And then he said, over the last 10 years, we've defeated, I don't know what he said, 1,200 Democratic state legislators
right, yes.
across the country.
Yes.
And then he looked at it and he said, the last place we have Democratic leadership is in our local leaders. And he said on Fox TV, this is where we need to go next. And then he said, and besides, everything that's wrong with America is because of Democratic mayors.
Democrat mayors.
It is absolutely
right.
politics.
I mean, Judge, here is where I'll come to you and ask you kind of version of the same thing. I remember when the conversation came to expanding Medicaid, and the county judges of the big counties were side by side in advocating for the state to expand Medicaid. In many respects, the reason we talked about that, those costs were being borne by the counties regardless of whether we expanded, but they were being passed on to vote. You had Republican county officials alongside Democratic county officials all saying the same thing, because at the end of the day, working at this level, is without regard to party or ideology, right?
I have wonderful colleagues in county governance, particularly in the Conference of Urban Counties, which is essentially a bunch of white guy Republicans. These are counties with a population of 30,000 or more. They're great colleagues. We work really hard together. We share the responsibility for making a better future for our counties. These Republican leaders are aghast at what's happening at the state level. And many of them have been drummed out of the legislature to then return to public service as county officials. They can't make it in state government because it doesn't govern anymore. These are men and women who are interested in being public servants. They have left state government to go to the county level and municipal level government. And so I think that I am concerned about calling it a party ideology that's running this thing because, frankly, I don't think that's the Republican Party ideology either. I know a lot of good, hardworking public servant Republicans in county governance who don't like what's happening up there. When you listen to Ed Emmett's State of the County speech from November.
Ed Emmett is a county judge in Houston, Republican county judge.
And he is in open rebellion against Abbott and against a couple of representatives from his own backyard.
Yeah.
The lieutenant governor and Paul Betancourt are both from his neck of the woods. And he openly talks about the Medicare circumstance and how it's draining Harris County on property taxes. He openly talks about the response to Harvey and how he will be funding the infrastructure necessities out of property tax because the state is not dipping into its rainy day fund for the rainiest day of all.
Yeah, a day when it literally rained, right? Okay, we have microphones in the back. They're going to, or in the front, pardon me. We're going to walk around. If you have a question, please put your hand up, and we'll be more than happy to bring you into the last part of this conversation. Questions for the mayor, questions for the county judge. Gentleman in the back has been waving a sign that says universal living wage. I have a sneaky suspicion about the topic of his question, but go ahead. Jump in.
Thank you so much. Richard Troxel for House the Homeless. We help the disabled homeless get housing. In 2002 and in 2002, Travis County Commissioners Court and the City of Austin both passed resolutions for a living wage. We understand the restrictions that being able to enforce that for all businesses is extremely difficult and maybe beyond our reach. But we can lead by example. And so, if you go to our website, universallivingwage.org.
What's your question, sir?
Will the City of Austin and will the County of Travis move forward to pay their employees by the standard that was endorsed by both of those two entities 16 years ago?
Got it. Now,
to
understanding
lead by example.
Understanding Judge Eckhardt was not judge in 2002, Mayor Adler was not mayor, but they do own the offices that they inhabit, so first mayor and then judge. First of all, do you agree with the premise that the city and the county ought to be paying a living wage based on the resolutions passed at the time, and why, if you do believe it, aren't you doing it now?
I don't know what the language was in that resolution, but I absolutely believe that the city should be paying a living wage. And over the last 3 years, we've dramatically increased the minimum salary of workers. I think it's like at $14 right now for everyone in the city, including temporary employees in the city. The city requires living wage be paid by folks that are doing business and contracting with the city in construction. So I do believe it's important, and we should be using every tool we can. And the state legislature has taken away from us the ability to be able to do it outside of our own domain.
But you can do it inside your domain, and your response is, we should be doing it, and we are doing it.
Yes, we're moving in that direction.
Judge.
Travis County and the city of Austin, you're not going to have a problem with us trying to pay our own employees a living wage. We have a $13 wage floor at Travis County for all employees, plus a benefits package. And in my view, you should look at compensation as both wage and benefits. Our benefits package is far above what the market.
And the national minimum wage these days is $7.25. Is that right? Yeah. So the city and the county are paying close to double what the floor would be nationally.
And we, like the city, also demand that anyone who's contracting with us also pay a living wage and benefits with also grievance abilities, et cetera. So we're doing our part inside of our own worlds. We are not able to establish a minimum wage beyond that, although I think through moral suasion and proving up that you can pay a livable wage and provide decent benefits.
Right.
And you have a much more stable workforce, you have a better product. So I'm hoping that by example, our businesses will follow.
Let me ask you a tricky-
We do have greater ability with respect to things like sick leave.
Right, well that's, I'm glad you brought up a totally not controversial conversation. But this actually does get to another part of this, which is the city does do its part to attract businesses through the economic development door. Amazon obviously is an outsized example of that, but the fact is the city loves to create jobs and to create opportunity for people to enjoy all that is Austin by making available this deal or that deal or whatever it possibly can to attract business. Do you believe that the city should have an obligation, has a responsibility, when you make deals with businesses to locate here, that they pay a livable wage? I mean, I understand that you can't force people in the private sector to do things, but can you make that a component, or should you make that a component of deals that you cut with businesses that you seek to attract to Austin?
Absolutely. In fact, we're redoing what are called 380 agreements or incentive agreements. And remember, we really haven't done that many of those. I think my council's done like one of those over the last several years. Right. And I think the whole city's done 20 of them over a 10-year period.
So what are you requiring Amazon to pay if Amazon comes?
Well, I think that if Amazon would come, we would use the same lens for that we would use right now as we're rewriting 380 agreements, which is to say our biggest challenges are mobility and affordability in this city. What are you going to do to help us be able to address those issues rather than exacerbating a problem?
So you're not requiring them as part of the deal to do anything, but you're trying to bring them into a conversation in which they would see the wisdom of it on their own.
There is no deal for it to be part of or not part of. But the conversation that I have had consistently with respect to Amazon is if because of their scale or their resources, they're able to help us drive something with transportation and mobility that we're not going to be able to otherwise achieve for 20 years, I would like to hear that. If there's something that they can do to help us with affordability at a scale that we can't do on our own, I'd like to hear that. And I'm willing to have that conversation rather than just rule that can't happen. But that I've said in the letter to them, which contained no conversation about incentives or anything, I said, this is the conversation I want to have.
And obviously if they didn't want to have it, you wouldn't be in the 20 finalists.
Kind of surprising that we're still in there then. But we're rewriting the whole 380 agreement for what we would do ordinarily, forget Amazon, so that we're rewriting the matrix so that we focus on things like housing or middle skill jobs, training people who live here to be able to take jobs that they're not trained for or skilled to do now, so that if we use those incentives, if we use those 380 agreements, it's more laser focused on the benefits that we're trying to drive as a city.
Good. Other questions? Hands up, microphone.
I have a question
around.
over here.
Yes, ma'am.
You were talking about your Workforce Solutions Board, and it sounded kind of like a coup of some kind. Can you elaborate on that?
What aspect of it sounded like a coup to you?
But that you actually forced it to do something you wanted it to do.
And you consider that you're for that or against that? Pro-coup or anti-coup?
That was a nasty woman before it became popular, so I'm all about the coup.
All right, so pro-coup. Yeah.
I would say that those folks, it was a very willing and cooperative deal. I think that the Workforce Solutions and that community had the sense that this was something that was needed. I think that the judge and I really just provided the convening moment to enable that community to do what I think they all were trying to figure out how to otherwise do.
Good. We have about 3 minutes. I want to be sure that we respect your time and the time of the program and people in the room. Again, I've got microphones someplace.
One right here.
Hello.
I'm blind, so thank you. I apologize.
Good morning.
Hi.
You know what? So much love for you, Mayor Adler and Judge Eckhardt. You are a G, straight up. I love listening to you speak and represent the people because you're so straight up. What I'd like to talk about and ask is, where is there or is there a space? You already acknowledged it. There's nobody in this room who's trying to feed and house a family of 4 who makes $30,000. Like, I'm probably the poorest person in the room, and I make a little bit more than that. And I'm a community advocate. I'm boots on the ground. I'm community needs assessment every day. I see what people are actually dealing with. And part of the problem in my mind's eye, and what I'd love to see some assistance with from the perspective of the municipal government, is how do we address like all 13 things that contribute to cyclical poverty, 500%, APR, payday loans, and housing insecurity, and predatory lenders, all the things that add to it, right? There's no space where, like I said, I'm broke. I am so poor. But I do really good work. There's no space for there to be the bridges.
Let's give them a chance to. I mean, some of what I'm hearing, I suspect, predatory lending, payday loans. I mean, some of that has a role at another level of government, right? Where government has to work to solve that problem. Can you do everything if you wanted to, Judge, at the local level?
I mean, I don't know. Y'all are going to force me down on the meditation cushion, and I'm going to have to get all zen on y'all. But we can't do everything. None of us can do everything, but we can all do our part, right? And I think that the unifying principle here is that every single person who lives in Travis County is contributing in a very, very meaningful way to our overall prosperity. So how do we make sure, without intervention as a community, wealth has a tendency to pool in ever smaller and deeper pools. It has a tendency to not circulate. Wealth is risk averse. It wants to stay with wealth. And so our job as a community is to figure out how to get that shared, be a little bit more risky and daring, and move out into areas that are uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and go out to thoroughbred farms and hang out. Go see what it's like on Decker, over by Decker and Loyola. Spend some time. Really give of yourself, because really everybody is contributing. Everybody is bringing something to the table in some really meaningful way, and we're working very hard. I'm very thrilled about mine and the mayor's initiative with Workforce Solutions to get 10,000 people into these 3 specific job columns, and we're going to succeed in that. And not everybody wants to work in one of those 3 job columns.
Mayor, before we wrap up, last point to the questioner's point. You can't do everything. You may like to do everything, but you can't do everything. How do you prioritize? And if you can't do everything, to whom do you go or turn? I mean, I heard Roy say at the beginning, we can't nonprofit our way out of the problem. Mm-hmm. But clearly, government's getting out of the business of solving a lot of problems. The nonprofit community is among the communities being asked to step up at a time when government is stepping back. So how do you prioritize? What do you do, and to whom do you turn?
Well, it's not only nonprofits that are stepping up, and they need to, and it's obviously critical work. But I think that we're getting more and more ties to, and we need to figure out how to get increasing ties to market forces. Mm-hmm. I love your expression, tricking the market, which I'll probably steal and start using too.
Okay, I steal stuff from you all the time.
But not in a pejorative way in terms of tricking. Housing work should be complimented for years for thinking about how do we create a strike fund to be able to go after that $5 billion block of property, that workforce housing that we're going to lose over the next 10 years. Well, it's actually happening now. And I see on the program that one of the people participating in that will be speaking at the last session this afternoon, the Austin Housing Conservancy. There's money being raised, private market right now, because there's a private market tool that Austin has created that nobody else in the world has tried at this point to test out the concept of whether there's sufficient, not philanthropic dollars coming from foundations or companies, but actually getting to the corpus investors to try and get that 1% to 2% of the money that would be sent to socially responsive investment if it was really safe and it paid a 5 to 7% return. That's happening in the city and is incredibly exciting. Your question on how do you prioritize, I probably don't do that well, and my life-work balance is like way out of whack.
Join the club.
But I think that it is being as data-driven, as objective as you can, trying to figure out where you're going to have the greatest impact with the greatest ability to be able to achieve results.
Good. We have achieved the completion of this panel. Please give Mayor Adler and Judge Eckhardt a hand. Thank you. Housing Works. We'll see you again. Good.